It's my great pleasure to invite you on the ninth Trends in the Digital Education in Higher Education, which we organize here with the West Bohemia University Center for Education Studies and Czech Association for Distant Teaching Universities. So we are these three partners, let's say, in crime, who organize these events. Already we have the ninth, let's say, seminar, workshop. And for today, it's my big pleasure to invite here Mychelle Pride from the Open University. Mychelle, her, I'd say, lifelong, or I don't know if life was long, but at least a life path was very quite interesting, because she came here from New Zealand, original, traveling surpassed the United States of America, and arrived to UK, and finally she's now in Pilsen. So maybe she'll stay here because the city of, she found that there's a, she was maybe this maybe I don't know if it was the question, if her aim was to looking where is the beer origin, you know. So that's I think short introduction for today. I think Mychelle will have a presentation. If you have any kind of questions, you can ask her during. But anyway, we will have small debate, an open debate after her presentation. So I think just floor is yours. Welcome, Mychelle.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'll stand over here, but I do move a lot. I apologize. So thank you very much. So to start with, we've got two pictures on the screen. One is generated by a human, and one is generated by AI. So if you can raise your hand if you think this one is generated by a human. Nobody thinks this one's generated by a human. Why not? You're a team player. Any other thoughts? Ah, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, is this one human generated, or maybe it's AI generated? Human generated. Okay. So you are too clever, because this one is human generated and this one is AI generated. But what is interesting here is this author is Victor Keane, and he artist, and he painted these pictures in the 60s. He was a very famous artist, and he made a lot of money. And then in the 1990s, 1980s, he had a divorce with his wife, a very nasty divorce. And she took him to court and said, I painted all of those pictures. He didn't paint them. And so the judge in the case could not decide whether the man or the woman was the painter. So he brought in an easel and paints too. And he said to each of them, you have 1 hour, paint a picture. And the man said, oh, my shoulder, I can't paint. And the lady said, 50 minutes later, she had painted a picture. She was the true artist. And so what I want you to think about today is two things. One is that for a long time, we have not been able to know necessarily who is the creator of something. So this is not something new. And the second thing to think about is, how do we assess whether something has been produced by a student? So those two things to think about as we talk today. And this is a thank you to my colleague Liz Hardy, because she is a lawyer and she showed me this case, and it's very interesting. So many of you have probably known about large language models for a long time, but the public, November 2022, yes, was a revelation for some people. It was new. And this cartoon is from June, so even 6 months after that, or 8 months after, people are still saying, what will the impact of ChatGPT be? Well, there's a lot we don't know. We know that a lot of it is made up. That's true, hallucinations. We know we don't know if it will take our jobs away. People are very worried, I will not have a job. And my answer is, your job will not disappear, but it will disappear because people who know how to use generative AI will have your job. Yeah? Or security risks, we have no idea what the security risks are. It could damage our reputation. I have people at the Open University tell me, there will be no more Open University. It is the end of the university. They genuinely believe that it is the end of the university. What do we know for sure? Only that we want to adopt it everywhere as fast as we can. And there are a lot of people who go, yes, I must have it now, I must use it now, I need it to do everything. And so that leaves us thinking, well, what does it mean for education? So I can tell you are all very aware of the text-based tools. I will share the slides with you, and this link here is from a UK newspaper, The Guardian, but it is a visual explainer of how generative AI works, and it is excellent. So that's a link for you. And then I'm sure you already know, and I should say actually, this image was created by generative AI. This image was the image was created by generative AI. So no surprise, a lot of the images that I will use today have been created by generative AI, and in the notes are the prompts. So we know that there are image generators. We know that we've built into search engines. And we know that we can buy plugins for different subject areas as well. So there's a lot already that's available, and every day more products are being available. And if you have a look, I think I don't have the slide in here anymore. I will share it with Lucia. And there's a very beautiful way of presenting the growth of large language model tools worldwide. And you look at some of the complex tools that are coming out of China, for example, that we don't use, we don't know about. So there's a lot. So here in English, we say there's an elephant in the room. I don't know if you say that in Czech as well, but when there's something, so no. So in English, we say there's an elephant in the room. You know it's there, but you don't talk about it. Yeah, and so we know that there are elephants in the room, things that we don't normally talk about or we don't want to talk about, but we must talk about. So here are some of them, and on the slides I've got a couple of elephants as we go through the presentation. So these are elephants in the room. We don't know what the training data sets are. That's a problem for many people. Bias is very interesting because we know that the algorithms are adjusted in some cases for bias in gender. We know they are adjusted for bias in ethnicity or race. The biggest challenge I think we have is bias, cultural bias, because of who are creating the tools. It is predominantly men, it is predominantly white men. And you can't say, I'm sure you got the picture of that of me with my hand on my nose. And you can't say even Western. You can't even say Western, because if you put China in the middle of the map, the West is now the East. So cultural bias exists in the generative AI tools, and that's something that maybe we are not talking enough about. We know there are issues with data protection and copyright. I have colleagues in arts and humanities, so authors and artists, who refuse to use generative AI on principle. Yeah, it goes against what they believe in. And my response to that is, well, at first my response was, well, try it. Right, that makes sense, try it. But then I thought, I don't eat meat, right? So I do not eat meat. If someone said to me, try it, no thank you. So we have to think about, if someone has an ethical issue with generative AI, is the right thing to say to them, well, just try it? I don't know the answer to that question. Over-dependence, absolutely. We have issues with concerns about, well, what if people start using generative AI and then they don't think anymore? Have we lost critical thinking skills? The concern. And then misinformation, of course, because of the hallucination. So these, I've put the elephants in the room right at the front of the presentation. Everything that I say from now on, this is behind it. We are aware of these things, we know these things, and we need to think about them. So there's a continuum in, I put this slide in after talking to the Vice Rector this morning. We know that there's a continuum in how we can respond to generative AI in education. So some institutions have prohibited it. No, not allowed to use it. Students cannot use it. But then maybe you are saying staff can use it. Is it fair to say staff can use it but students cannot use it? Okay, so there's some challenges with the prohibition. Or we might have all the way on the other side here, the green light culture, which means go, 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 that fast everywhere. And the University of Michigan has created 3 products, and I would recommend that you go and look at the University of Michigan's website. If you do University of Michigan Generative AI, they have created 3 products that are available to staff and students. There's a general product, it's based on their own training data sets. There's a general product that is for users for everyday tasks. There is a mid-technical product, and then there's a highly technical back-end product as well. So they've got three different tools that are available to their staff and students. That's really great forward thinking. They must have put a lot of money into that. And then in the middle, we have this idea of academics have the autonomy to decide. So Harvard, for example, they have said to their academics, you decide whether or not you want students and staff to use generative AI. There's a slightly different continuum. This is from Professor Mike Sharples, where we go from the banned. Now he says you can evade, which is saying things like, ask your students to say what prompt they used, when they did it, who the prompt author was. So we know it's here, but we're just kind of going to talk around it. You can adapt, so you can change your current assessment, adapt it to think about how that might work with generative AI and with your students, or we can wholly embrace it, which is kind of your green light culture. So 2 different continuums to think about. So another generative AI image, although I played with it with the shape, but there are 4 things I want us to think about today. The first is, who are the students of the future? I'll come on to that in more detail in a minute. The second thing we're going to think about is learning, teaching, and assessing and generative AI. The third thing we're going to think about is the personalization of the student experience and how we might use generative AI to personalize the student experience. And the fourth thing is the university ready? And I think this university readiness question is really interesting. So, who is the student of the future? If you just think for a minute, if you want to close your eyes, you can. Just think 10 years from now, 20 years from now, who are going to be my students? Just think about that for a minute. We need to think about the students of the future, because we need to be able to teach the students of the future, and we need to be able to prepare the students for the future. So here are a few things that I thought about that might or might not be on your list. And your Vice Rector reminded me this morning, and I think this is really actually a critical thing. I forget that I am no longer 20, right? In my mind, I am 20 years old. In my mind, I think like a 20-year-old. But in reality, I'm 54. So how do I know what the student of the future is going to be? I think ultimately we need to ask students, and we need to be speaking to young people who are not yet students to find out what is the student of the future. When my nephew was 3 years old, my father gave him an iPad, and we were mortified. Like, you can't give a 3-year-old an iPad. But what does that, this was a long time ago, but what does his future of education look like? He's 14 now, he'll be 15 so he's had the iPad 11 years. His education already looks very different because of generative AI. No one could have imagined when we gave him that iPad at 3 that generative AI would be here, or that we would have had a pandemic, or that would be the wars that we're seeing and experiencing. So at the same time that we gave Hayden an iPad, we had a good friend whose son was 3, Leo. We gave him an abacus, like with the actual physical things you have to move backwards and forwards. Leo played with the abacus as much as Hayden played with the swiping of the iPad. I just think that's very interesting to think about. what is the starting point and where are our students going to end up? So I think that they will be technologically smart. I think that they will be globally aware. Now, this may well be the same as it was when we were students, but the world has changed. I think that students are ethically and socially responsible, and I think that they will continue to be, and they will continue to challenge those elements. And I do think very much so that there's the entrepreneurial mindset, that making money mindset. What I don't have up here are things like lacking patience, like they want it now. It's the now culture. Why do I have to study 3, 4, 7, 8 years? I want it now. So I think that's in there too. What are some of the challenges? Definitely our students are time poor, and at the Open University, 70% of our students are in full-time work, and they have families, and they're carers, and they're trying to balance all of those commitments. I think students will become even more time poor. We, of course, have many financial concerns. I say, we have students who are having to choose, do I heat my house or do I feed my children? They're making those heating or eating choices. But I also have colleagues. A colleague came to see me at my house a couple of weeks ago, and she said to me, I have not had the money to fix my boiler for a year. She's had no hot water for a year. How can a colleague at the Open University who earns a good wage not be able to afford to have hot water in her house? We have to think about the financial situation of our students. Of course, the well-being. There's so much more now around being confident to share your mental health conditions or your mental ill health or the challenges that you are facing, and more of our students are sharing that with us. And then also the job market dynamics are a challenge, because what are jobs going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years? In terms of the university, students will be expecting flexible learning pathways. I think when we take into these characteristics into consideration, they might want it quicker, they might want it slower. They might want it differently than we're able to offer it. They might not want set assessment dates. They might want flexible assessment dates. As a university, we need to be adaptable to the changing world around us. So the curriculum that we write today might not be fit for purpose in 6 months or a year. How are we going to be agile in our curriculum development? And then the lifelong learning piece here, absolutely, tying in with this entrepreneurial mindset and wanting it now. I'm going to go and work now. I'm going to create my own business. I'm going to be an influencer, whatever it might be. I'm going to earn a lot of money. I'm not going to go back and study until I am older. So we have to think about that lifelong learning and what that might look like in chunks. So maybe it's over time that they're doing their studies over many, many, many years. And then finally, on the future of the student, soft skills. So these are the human skills, the human side of things. So as I talked about, patience, the problem solving, problem identification. I think I've got that up here. So being able to identify problems, being able to solve problems, that critical thinking. And I think, I don't know how many years ago in England, but there was a time when interdisciplinary, where you mixed, I don't know, psychology and biology, or where you mixed economics with languages. Those mixes were not acceptable. But actually going forward, we need to give students those interdisciplinary options. And how are we going to provide those interdisciplinary options for the student of the future? So I'm just going to ask, what am I missing? What did you think that's not up here?
I'm missing resilience.
Yes.
This is, I think, also already start to be topic for some of these students, not all of them, but sometimes, like if they helicopter moms, it's like everything is okay. And then also Simon Senega's nice interviews about how these people, when they came, sees mountains, and they're, I cannot climb mountains on one I cannot go by elevator, I need to climb. So yes. It's also, we need to think how to learn them that things shouldn't be just easy sometimes, but they need to do a little work. As I say, like no pain, no gain in some way. So this is also another one question for challenges.
Yeah, resilience is absolutely right, and I'm embarrassed I didn't have it up here, because I do think I call it an easy bucket and a hard bucket. And I think at the minute, too many people chuck it in the easy, you know, it's too hard, I'm not going to do it. I only want to do the things that are in the easy bucket. And I am seeing that. I'm seeing that as a university as well, that the decisions that the university is making are the easy ones, and we're not doing enough to challenge ourselves as an institution with the hard decisions.
And this is also part of the curriculum, which I saw start to be more and more discussed when I was discussing with colleagues over Europe. It's also not just problem thinking, but also challenge-based education. It's part of the curricula.
Absolutely, and I think rather than just thinking about the problem solution, but because quite often, and I think coming will be generative AI to solve problems, but to identify what the problem is in the first instance. So it's not so much about prompt engineering, but it's about understanding what the problem is first, and then thinking about the prompt. Anything else that you thought of?
I think the problem is teachers of the future. Yeah, because all these characteristics. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, because of recording. Okay, so thank you for this recognition. And that I think that the problem is teachers of the future, because yeah,
That's really
because
interesting.
they should be prepared to prepare flexible pathways. Also, the university bureaucracy and administrative should be prepared for these flexible pathways to adapt, be prepared for lifelong learning, to deliver soft skills, interdisciplinarity. I do not know how to teach critical thinking, problem identification, problem solving, everything take on global scale, because the students are globally aware, keep up their tempo in technologies. Yeah.
That's a really good point. So
and
not
same
just
thing that, you know, I'm I'm at the university because I like some safety, right? I'm not startup guy, so how to teach entrepreneurial.
It's a very hard word.
The fourth item, mindset, entrepreneur. Yeah. So how to teach mindset of entrepreneur. So this is, so for me it's very hard, right? Because they must feel from me that I like safety and some safe position of big organization, and how to teach them, hey, be more curious, hey, be more courageous.
Just not like me. Yeah. That's really, really thought-provoking.
Petra.
I don't want to correct your pronunciation of entrepreneurship, but
I think it was a beautiful pronunciation.
yeah, there is a lot of like French-speaking people in this room. But for me, it's it looks like a Eurocentristic list. It's West-oriented totally. And not only like, because you've talked about biases, and that's what I see in this list, just a short remark.
So how would you change it? What would you add or take away?
For instance, ethically and socially responsible. Even like if you look at the European map, the more we go to the east, the less the people are like ethical or socially responsible.
Based on your understanding of ethical.
But that's meta, but I've stressed that I'm talking about Europe right now.
Yeah.
But then there is no like a Asian or African point of view at all from my perspective.
That's brilliant.
Well, I would maybe not agree so much with Peter. Well, I agree that it could be some partly European way, but I think there is, globally aware. For me, it's also looking for the perspective. How I will read it, from different kind of angles. And also know it's also we use it now. It's also popular. The concept which when I was in Antwerp, I see a colleague from the Netherlands. She's also originally from UK. She also was speaking about Siva concept, which is a concept came from Hinduism, and it means that you are giving something, try to care without expect that you will get something back. So this is also another. But generally, I think you are right. For me, it's when you write this characteristic, is for me at this moment like some kind of like wish list which we would like to have in learning outcomes. It really should be now. So the question is, will be really in 20 years here. So this is one question. And you are right. There is also some kind of, if you look on the map, Europe, and I think it's biggest on different kind of cultural experience, historical. From you look from the north to south or southwest part, there is less trust, less things about technical. We see these things also in quality assurance, because in the eastern country, and Czech is also part of that, try to control things. We are not looking quality assurance, building not just quality assurance, but building quality culture and trusting things. So we are still like more controlling and do not trust people. So it's part of the culture. So this is a question if this will be changed or not. But I think that this characteristic would be nice, aim to go here, and maybe I don't know if it could be different to have to behave ethically and socially responsible. I understand that could be have different kind of meaning in different kind of culture, of course. So that of course doesn't have to be just general things, but need to be adapted according to context.
So my challenge for you when I go away is for you to think about your student of the future. Yeah. Because I don't know the answer, I just have the questions. Okay. Okay, so happy to move on to curriculum learning, teaching, assessing. I think this will take us some time. So, of course, a generative AI image. So, this is a very recent article from the BBC Young Reporter. So the BBC Young Reporter is news for children by children, or by young people. And in this article here, it's called "Most of Our Friends Use AI in Schoolwork." And why this is important is because last academic year, when generative AI came into the public domain, we were working with students who had never used the technology and had never been in an environment where there were rules about the technology. But as time progresses, we will be having students enter our universities who come from different places with different guidance and different rules. So we need to think about what the starting point is going to be, because the starting point will be different every year, every cohort. So I think it's interesting here. We look at 31 out of 33 had already used the AI in their schoolwork. Okay, and 27 thought it should be taught in schools. So what does that mean for our students of the future? These are some very recent articles. Well, this one is not. So this one is the UNESCO report, and I know that, Lucia, you have seen it, but if you haven't, it's a very good report to go and have a look at. This is a BBC article about time-strapped teachers saying that AI is helping them. And that's one of the things that I think, too, it's the mundane things, or the things that don't require thinking, that I want to get generative AI to use for me. I want to do the creativity. I would not have wanted, I tell you right now, generative AI did not plan this PowerPoint, right? This is all me. Obviously, the pictures are from generative AI, but I planned this session. I don't think generative AI would have planned a session like this. And then this last one here is a brand new, 1st of December, there was a consultation with 500 UK institutions about generative AI and education. The results have just been released. Oh no, sorry, that's the next page. Sorry, my apologies. This one is AI Framework for Schools released in Australia. So this is just yesterday, I think it was, or 2 days ago. I can't remember what day it is, but detail is not my, I am not good with detail. So this is from Australia, and then this one here is the consultation that's just been released. The results have just been released in the UK. In the slides, all of these images have links, so if you click on them, they will take you to the articles. Okay. So I have a colleague in Ireland, Professor Mark Brown, and he says the toothpaste is out of the tube. We cannot put the toothpaste back into the tube. We can't put generative AI back into the large language model, right? It's here. What I found funny about this when I was having this discussion with Mark, he said, oh, and I He's like, I got the toothpaste out and I squeezed it on the counter and I put the toothpaste down and I took a picture. I said, Mark, I used I used generative AI to create my images. I didn't have to, although he probably had more fun with squirting his toothpaste out of the tube than I had with using generative AI. So I want to look at curriculum. This is just a little bit about what we've done at the Open University. So we've been looking at curriculum in generative AI for a couple of years now. We've been doing research at the Open University in generative AI since 2011. And in the last couple of years, we've done 5 workshops with 88 different staff members looking at how we can use, so the goal that was set was we want to explore how the GTP language model can be used to speed up course module production. So at the Open University, it is 2 years for a module from the beginning of an idea to actually being available to students. That's not adaptable. When we talked about the institutions being adaptable and being agile, that's not. So we need to make changes, and we see that generative AI can help us make these changes. So we got these people together, and they came up with 172 challenges that we face because of generative AI, and they came up with 148 ideas of how we can use generative AI in our curriculum. And these are broken down into the kind of the different areas that they came up with. So around how we can improve the learning experience, the accessibility and inclusivity, so how we can make our materials more inclusive. One of the concerns that we have is we've been spending a lot of time over the last 3 to 4 years decolonizing our curriculum. What that means is we've been looking at our curriculum. So for example, there was we write all of our own materials. We don't use other people's textbooks. So everything is written by academics at the Open University, and they're very proud of this. Looking at this image of the great theorists of education, 20 different people, 19 were white males, right? So we've changed that now. We've gone through our curriculum and we've said, how do we diversify our curriculum? How do we make it more representative of our students? How do we make it more inclusive? Well, there's a concern, of course, with generative AI that we could go backwards. So we've got to be careful and think about how we're using generative AI and the bias. So we're looking at building our own. So what we've done as a prototype is we've taken all of the curriculum that we've written. We've put that into a data warehouse. We've got the coding on top of it so that actually now staff can say, I want to write a section about X, and it will pull up pre-existing curriculum, or it will give an idea for what might be written, and then the authors can take that and adapt it and improve it and so forth. So we're looking at different ways because that would speed things up immensely. We've already written a lot. Why do we keep redoing that? So there's back-end stuff, there's content creation, there's things about how do we improve the student experience. So there's lots of things going on here with how we can use generative AI and curriculum. Yeah, okay. We could do a whole day on that slide. So I apologize for being so rushed, but we can come back to it. So the next section is around the learning and teaching. This is a stock image. This is not a generative AI image. You can probably tell immediately. It's a stock image from Microsoft. So I had a play with a few things. So I said to Bing, write a 1,500-word higher education first-year student academic essay on the subject, what are the top 3 most pressing challenges faced by societies across the globe? For each challenge, identify and explain 2 reasons for it being in the top 3. For each challenge, identify and explain 2 reasons why experts might argue it should not be in the top 3. And it produced this lovely essay for me with an introduction, the different challenges, the reasons it's in the top 3, the reasons it's not in the top 3. The full text is in the notes of the slides. And then I said to ChatGPT, so I went from Bing to ChatGPT, critically evaluate this essay I wrote about the top 3 pressing challenges faced by societies across the globe. And then I put that essay in. And it came back and said, right, here's a critical evaluation, structure and clarity, inclusion of counter-arguments, citations and data, etc. So I have presented these slides several places, and I've had different responses. I've had the responses, this is great, we would love to help our students with the structure of their writing, we would love for our students to get this kind of response and then use it to make their writing better. 2, this is a hallucination. You know, counter arguments, there's no such thing as this opposites. You can't talk about counter arguments. You know, you can't talk about, and whoa, you know, so different people respond different ways. So then I said, but isn't it great that we're having this discussion about the quality of this response? And couldn't you have that discussion with your students and get your students het up, excited and angry about the quality of this response? Would that not make them think the next time they were writing about how to be better writers? So it's interesting to have the different responses. I also had a play with as a personal tutor. I said, you are a personal tutor for a university's master's level student studying computing. Create a 5-question quiz to test theoretical concepts regarding generative AI. Ask 1 question at a time. If the answer is correct, make the next question harder. If the answer is incorrect, explain why the answer is incorrect. Then provide the correct answer and explain why it is correct. Make the next question easier. So, up came the quiz. First question. It was multiple choice question, A, B, C, D, and I selected an answer. And I can't remember whether it was right or wrong. And then, it must have been right. I got the first one right. Then up came the next question. It was now a fill in the blank. So I don't know whether the concept was harder, but it had taken the idea that a fill in the blank is harder than a multiple choice. I got that question wrong. It did not explain, it did explain why it was, no, it didn't explain why it was incorrect, but it did provide the correct answer, but it didn't explain why it was correct. So this set of instructions worked-ish, but didn't work fully. And I think the longer and the more complex the instructions, maybe the responses aren't what you expect. But if you play with it and tweak it and you get better at writing it, then ultimately, but it quizzed me. Yeah, it quizzed me. I'm not a computer scientist, and the questions were impossible very quickly. But that's just an idea. I played around with it with creative writing as well. I think there's this thing around that we're struggling with at the university for subjects where there's one answer. So maybe learning a language, and they have to write a story about themselves. Hello, my name is, I live in, etc. Well, there's only one way to say I live in Pilsen. Or maybe there's not, I don't know, but in English there's only one way to say I live in Pilsen. So how do you deal with generative AI where there's one answer to creative writing where there's infinite answers? And that's something that we've been thinking about with generative AI as well. So Professor Mike Sharples, who is from the Open University, he has written a book, no surprise, but he talks about every powerful pedagogy could be augmented by AI. And here are some of his examples of ways that we could teach and learn with AI. So he said here, this one we hear a lot, Socratic opponent, AI acts as an opponent to develop an argument. So, and my husband's played with that too. He's played with arguing, having a discussion. What's the correlation between socioeconomic status and happiness? Right? And so then the tool says, what do you mean by socioeconomic status? What do you mean by happiness? And having those discussions with the tool. You know, this is a tool, remember, of words that predicts language, but does not have logic, rationale, etc. But yet it's having this discussion and this argument with you that you could say, wait a minute, there is some logic in this argument. There is some rationale in this argument. We've talked about a study buddy, so you'd help the student reflect on the learning material or create quizzes and things like that. Motivator, games and challenges to extend the learning. Exploratorium, absolutely, to explore and interpret data. Alternative ways of expressing an idea. So I think these are quite interesting things. I was going to say something, but it's gone out of my head. When it comes back, I'll come back to it. So there's lots of different ways that we can use generative AI in our teaching and learning. I think yeah, the way students use it is going to be different from the way that teachers use it as well. And we need to reflect on that, how we can work with our students to give them ideas about how they can use it. Of course, always critically thinking about any of responses that are generated. So coming on to assessment, and this seems to be the biggest question, that the most commonly asked question, is how do I prepare my assessment in an era of generative AI? And there are no, well, I should say, there are so many answers. There are infinite answers, I think, at this point in time. And I don't think there's a consensus. And it's going to be different for every context. And it is really tricky. I'm going to bring an elephant into the room right away. And this is around detecting generative AI in assessment. So I've played with, that's not really right to say, I've asked staff lots of examples. Was this written by generative AI? Was this written by a student? And it's 50-50. People don't always get it right, even people who are experienced, although people who are experienced with large language models and researching large language models are more likely to choose which one is human generated, which one is AI generated. But I have been playing with that. At the end of the day, the tools that currently exist have false positives and false negatives and may potentially bias against certain students with particular characteristics. So tools are no good at the minute for determining whether or not. And I also actually ask, is this the right question to be asking? Because I find that when I start talking to people about generative AI, let's say they go, oh my God, it's just all about cheating. It's the end of the university degree. It shuts their thinking down about the possibilities. So we really need to think about moving on from this. And this is why it's an elephant in the room. We have to discuss it. We have to right away get people to see that actually that's not what we should be talking about. Let's not spend 80% of our time talking about cheating when actually very few of our students cheat. The majority of our students want to learn, and they want to walk away with knowledge and skills. So let's spend 80% of our time talking about the possibilities, not about the cheating. So this is a colleague of that I know Lucia knows as well, Henrietta Carbonell. She is from the Distance University in Switzerland. And she has said what we need to do, and this is an old quote actually, this is from the 10th of February 2022, this is before generative AI tools were in the public domain. She said it's about trust. It's about building trust with our students. We want to build trust in our students so that they become responsible academics, they become responsible students, they become ethical and responsible, and they use generative AI ethically and responsibly. So that trust is what matters, not about, we have to be able to trust that they're not going to lie. For me, and I worked with this with the creative writing staff, for me, the greatest thing about being a teacher is empowering students to use their own voice. To giving students that gift of confidence to leave with their qualification, knowing that they can use their own voice, they can be themselves, and they can make a difference. They can't do that if they're relying on generative AI. Their words and their voice is far more powerful than anything that generative AI will produce. So how do we work with our students to empower them and just give them that gift of confidence in their own words? I think that's what matters more than anything else, is empowering our students. And by empowering them, we're giving them the ability to and the skills to use the tools, whilst also giving them what is important for them as a human being. So, why do we assess? This is another elephant in the room. What's the point of assessment? So why don't you throw a few things out here? Why do you assess your students? Well, we can all go home, because if we're not going to assess them, we can just put assessment aside and not worry about it.
So generally, we need to prove that they have some kind of learning outcomes they have achieved.
Yeah.
So it's some kind of also confirmation, not for only us, but also for external stakeholders. I don't know, it could be parents, could be employers. So we let's say accredit that these students have these kind of competencies. So that could be some summative. Sometimes Sometimes also we have to do it, so it's something I don't know if everybody like to do it. But also the second way is also maybe that kind of form, as this kind of formative assessment can help students to grow, to take their responsibility for learning and to learn new things. So also given like a kind of navigation. So this is some kind of these general reasons why we do assessment. Or sometimes we are also obsessed in some kind of area of assessment in some cultures maybe. So this is a question about it.
Yeah, so we've talked about some formative assessment, summative assessment, external stakeholders, and that could be the government, employers, parents, and then for the students' own gain. Why else?
Also, this could be peer assessment, so they can learn how to assess. That's also another way how it's possible to do it.
So assess to learn how to assess.
Yeah, and self-assessment is well.
And self-assessment, absolutely, self-assessment, yes. Anyone else, any other reasons why we assess our students?
Maybe I would say it's kind of general pressure on them not to procrastinate too much.
Yes, yes. If you can say it again to the microphone so that we have it for the recording. For the recording.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to say more now. Yeah.
No, say the same
Just-
thing for the recording.
Yeah, for the recording. It's kind of a gentle pressure on them not to procrastinate too much.
Yeah. Yeah, for some students, they need it, don't they,
Okay.
to keep going with their studies. Any other ideas for why we assess? So I challenge you after today, and as some of you are pedagogical experts, to go away and really think about why you assess and make sure that each assessment that you give to your students has meaning. Because if it doesn't, don't give it to them. Don't assess for the sake of assessing. So at the Open University, I don't know, sorry.
Okay, work anyway.
At the Open University, we say that our assessment is teaching, which I think is very interesting. So we are a distance university. Our students don't see our tutors. They don't come in person. And so one of the ways in which we teach our students is through the feedback they receive when we assess them. So something that you always hear when you start at the Open University is our assessing is teaching. So that's, I think, something to think about too, the feedback that we give. So you need to figure out why you assess before you can figure out how to use generative AI in assessment. Because otherwise you can perpetuate, you can keep going with this idea of assessing for the sake of assessing, because we always have. And it all comes back about thinking about the future. So why do we assess? How are we going to change assessment? So in a short term, so thinking about the quick adaptations that we might make for assessment, we have some different things here. So we might go with application-based, which means that we apply knowledge. We ask our students to apply knowledge to a particular problem. It might be that it's project-based, so it's actually built on something that a whole project that they are working through, and therefore it's not something that generative AI can reproduce. And collaborative work. Now, I don't know about your students, but our students always go, oh, I don't want to do collaborative work. But actually, we've created some, and I'll share them with you, Lucia. We've created some little videos by students, for students, about why they do actually end up liking collaborative work. So they start off not liking it, but they end up liking collaborative work. So collaborative work is another way that you might have to incorporate generative AI in that collaborative work, but at least working collaboratively, it can't be done solely by the generative AI tools. And that's what I was going to think about, actually. I remembered now, something I was going to say earlier. So our marketing colleagues, teaching marketing, not doing the marketing, they have an assessment where the student has to do an interview with a person. And now some of our students are in secure units, which means they're in prison, or they might be in hospitals that they cannot leave for various reasons. We have students who are far in the middle of the top of Scotland. I don't know if you've ever looked at a map of Scotland, but it is like this big, right? And people at the top of Scotland, they have very little connectivity, and there are very few people. They can't just pop down to their local business and do an interview. The marketing school are using generative AI and saying to students, create the character or the person you would be interviewing in generative AI, and then have an interview with them. And that's working for those students who don't have access to someone that they can get to. Iterative, so this is where you're asking students to show their work as they go, and you give them a percentage towards their final mark for each draft that they are doing. Open book exams. We were talking about this earlier. In real life, I don't sit there in a room by myself going, oh my God, I can't remember. I get the book out, or I go on the internet. So absolutely, why not teach our students how to live an open book life through open book exams? Oral examinations. There's a great movie called Flash of Genius. It's about the man who invented the intermittent window wipers. Sometimes they go fast, sometimes they go slow. Don't know what it was like for you on Saturday when your snow was coming down, what your windshield wipers were doing. But he created these, and then he ended up in a court case with Ford. The movie is called Flash of Genius because it's when was that moment, when was that flash of genius when you came up with the idea? Your students will know the flash of genius that led them to something. Generative AI cannot tell you that flash of genius. So in an oral examination, you can ask about the flash of genius. Complex case studies, I speak for himself. Incorporating generative AI, so actually using generative AI in the assessment and giving points for using generative AI in a responsible and ethical way. And then individualize. We get a lot of pushback on this. We get a lot of people saying we can't do this. This individualize, which means I've got an assignment for you, an assignment for you, assignment for you. They're all different. And we have tutors saying, oh, that's too much work, or oh, how can I mark all these different assignments? So we just have to think differently about, well, how can we do that? So that's the short term. Henrietta, same colleague, has written a great guide, a teacher's guide to ChatGPT and remote assessments. And again, the link to this is in the slide deck, and you can have a look at some of the things that she's suggested. And that's where she started with producing an assessment guide for her staff. And she did this very quickly. It was brilliant. A bit longer term, I think we need to think about what can humans do that generative AI tools cannot do, and we need to be assessing on the things that generative AI cannot do, or we need to be assessing on using generative AI to reach an answer, but not necessarily assessing on the generative AI skills. Because when, for example, the internet came up, did we incorporate internet testing into every single assessment? No, we didn't. But we know we do now. We don't even think twice about the internet. And this will be the same with generative AI. So students are going to be using it in their future careers, so we do need to make sure that we develop their understanding of digital skills. That needs to be built in to the assessment process somewhere or somehow. Or maybe we say it's not built into assessment, but it is something that we develop anyway. We might build it in and not reward points for it. We absolutely need to talk about the limitations, the risks, and the ethical implications, and we need to build those into building our students and into the assessment. We, again, need to be clear about which are the human skills and those links to employability skills. As I said right up front, jobs will shift and change. It's not generative AI that's going to take your job away. It's people who can use generative AI that will take your job away. And then finally here, authentic. We talk a lot about authentic assessment. So for example, make it real and make it real to the student's own context. So we're very fortunate at the Open University because students are working. So we can ask them an assessment about a patient they've been working with if they're a nursing student, or we can ask them about a network if they're a network engineer and they're a network student. So, but how do we make assessment more real, fit for real life? So a little bit around personalization. I have no idea what time it is, by the way. Okay. Okay, perfect. Personalization. So having said all of these things, I think the key to the future is personalizing the student experience. So how can it be personalized? Well, you'll see here I've got student well-being across the bottom, and I think we need to think about student well-being from the second they contact us and are interested until when they are already in their future careers and maybe coming back and doing more study with us in the future. So We could build it into initial advice and guidance, so it could be algorithm-driven initial advice and guidance. Some students will want to speak to a person. Some students will be very happy not to speak to a person, so we can build it in on early days. We can have generative AI maybe in combination with a human, creating individualized study plans for the student. And those can go, that can travel with the student for their entire student experience. And then using the data we were talking about yesterday, Franciszek, we can put that data, that data can help shape that personalized plan across the entire student experience. It's not just at the beginning of their student experience. And I've put career guidance here from the very beginning, understanding the motivation, the study motivation of our students. And then we can use generative AI in the background to help provide career guidance, and also as they go across their entire journey with their individualized study plans, having that career guidance sitting behind the algorithm is really important. And then in terms of when they're here, so adaptive learning platforms, so it may well be that different students will use different platforms for their learning based on what they like and what they need. So there'll be some students who might be using their mobile phone, they might be using a laptop, they might be wanting to use a virtual learning environment by Moodle, they might not want to. What are those different learning environments that we can produce, and how can we use generative AI to guide the student with an appropriate learning platform? Smart content, so we're at the Open University, you take a module, you can take any module next, right? So it's not like here where you might have to go through a certain set of modules, or you might have optional modules, but generative AI can help with smart module recommendations. It can also help within the study. So if you're doing more online, even though you don't have distance students, maybe they're going through reading the materials online, and then the tool can say, oh, I noticed that you're really struggling with this section. Why don't you read this bit now? That will help you. So it's a personalized journey. When I was a child, I used to love, I don't know if you have them here, they're like mystery books. And it's like, if you want Lucia to live, go to this page. And if you want Mychelle to live, go to this page. And it was a personalized murder mystery for kids. And that's kind of how I love that. I read those books over and over and over, because you can have different ending every time. So again, smart content recommendations within the learning materials themselves. And then we have a lot of students for whom, even if English is their first language, their academic English, their writing isn't particularly good. So generative AI can absolutely help them with their writing. And then finally, student-driven chatbots. And what I mean by this is that the student engages with the chatbot. The student takes the initiative. The student is the one who engages to say, I have a problem, or I'd like to know more, or can you help me with, or what's the answer? As opposed to learning analytics-driven academic support, where the learning analytics say, this is what the student might find useful, this is the next path for the student, I've noticed that the student has stopped doing something, is there a problem? And so you can either have a student-driven or a learning analytics-driven. And then a personal AI tutor assistant. This is something that we are playing with at the Open University. So we did a survey of our students. We did a mock-up, a proof of concept around a personal learning assistant, and we tested it with students, and you can see here that 3/4 were positive about the idea. We looked at it with an avatar so that they could choose the avatar, and it would travel with them throughout their student experience. 62% would use the avatar. I wouldn't myself, but 2/3 would, and would like to have it available in our virtual learning environment, 2/3 of the students. So it's an overwhelmingly positive reaction from our students that we tested it with, that they would like an AI-driven personal learning advisor throughout their time. So last bit of the slides, is the university ready? And this was a question I think we've asked up front, but we also asked the question, is the teacher ready, the teacher of the future? So I asked my staff, not my staff, every time I interact with staff, so this includes staff from the EU, all across the EU in different sessions I've been involved in, how they are currently using generative AI. So this is right now already. And you can see that the staff are using it to produce quizzes and create case studies, to pilot for module remakes. And you can see they're using it in assessment already. They're using it to create assessment, but also using it to have students use it in assessment. And then they're using it to experiment how students might engage with it. Teachers are really curious about how are students using generative AI. And then we're looking at how we can use it, well, not we, someone is looking at it around academic conduct. That comes up in most of the responses. And then, so work-related, a lot of people for using it for email writing. Our deputy vice chancellor admitted that she used it to write a keynote speech. I did not use it for today. I probably should have. It would have saved me a lot of time in places. Somebody was saying that they were doing, I don't have it up here. Oh yeah, they were doing an internal audit and they used it to help them with some protocols for internal audits. So these are the ways that staff are already are using it. So, there we go. I thought there were 3 slides. There are only 2. There's a slide missing, but I've got another one I'll put in here before I share the deck with you. So as a university, you need to set, well, I think you need to set out some enabling principles that free your staff to do what they need to for the future. So fundamentally, the basic principle is that good learning, teaching, and assessing is good learning, teaching, and assessing. So this comes back to asking yourself, what is the purpose of assessment? Yeah? What does good teaching look like? Start there, and then build in how you can use generative AI in a lot of the ways that we've talked about. Challenge that bias, absolutely. So there are really two pieces here. The first one is around challenging the implicit bias, the bias that exists within the tools and with how we use them. It's about freeing up our minds. And here I talk about anti-racist and anti-discriminatory, accessible, and inclusive. The inclusive bit's interesting because it's going to create more of a digital divide. As the tools become paid for and the better tools become paid for, people who can't afford to pay for those tools or don't want to pay for those tools will become disadvantaged. So how are you as an institution, how are you in your teaching going to address that digital divide? And we talk about digital inclusion. How do we make sure that we include all of our students in this era that is coming? The next one is around embracing rationally and critically. That's what I talked about earlier. Don't be in a cave a million years ago. Don't rush out and do radical things. Find out, address your challenges, mitigate against the risks, and then the opportunities. We talk about double down on the opportunities. So do everything that you can. Put your bets on the best opportunities for you. You won't have time and money to do everything, so you'll need to prioritize. What are the opportunities that will make the most difference for you and your students? And that answer is going to be different in every context. So different for institution, different for a program, different for a module, different for a teacher. But if you have overarching enabling principles which mean we are empowering you to use generative AI and to engage with generative AI, then you will be able to embrace it rationally and critically. And then the final bit here is about empowering your users, whether that's your staff or your students. How are you upskilling? How are you ensuring that your staff and your students have the skills, but also the knowledge to make the choices about when and how to use generative AI? How are you empowering your students and your staff? So I think to be a university that's ready for the future, you need to have these things in place. And probably a lot of money, which no universities have, or very few universities have. So that's my talk before we come back to I've got 2 or 3 minutes at the very end. But that's my talk for now. So I would like to provoke you, and then we'll have a discussion that I won't lead, which is great. A few things to provoke you with. Garry Kasparov, chess master, has said, a good human plus a machine is the best combination. So that's one provocation. And I will leave these provocations up as we turn to discussion. So, the first point is, thank goodness for generative AI, we can finally do something about our traditional old-fashioned assessment. Discuss. Academic integrity is a pedagogical issue, so it's not about generative AI. It is here and it will be here. Generative AI is just a tool passing through. We need to be able to trust our students. Does generative AI foster critical thinking? So are we going to create students who are critical thinkers, or is it going to create a generation of students dependent on algorithms? Bias in generative AI is no different from bias in existing curriculum. And computing degrees and creative writing degrees will become obsolete. We will no longer need them or have them in the age of generative education. So these are provocations. These are things for you to think about as we discuss. I'm happy for you to discuss anything at all that matters to you. This one is starred because it was written by generative AI. And this one is starred because it was partially written. I put in computing degrees and creative writing degrees. It just said degrees will become obsolete. So I put those in. So I will now hand over for discussion.
Well, thank you, Mychelle, for a very nice presentation. And I think that we got a lot of material which we can think about. And maybe I would like to think, because I think the role of universities and higher education institutions is also, and a role of teachers, partly, if I will say, we'll use metaphor even for distance education, university, some kind of a classroom. So, because this is a question where happening the thinking, how we can improve the thinking of our students, because I think this is one of important things, how we can encourage students to develop their intellectual, let's say, toolkit, the package of competency, skills, and also attitudes, part of the competencies in the age of AI. You saw some kind of examples, and I will go to the last one, because I was also thinking about the writing skills, because writing is, let's say, the part of, let's say, internalization of the thinking. So do we really not need creative thinking, creative writing skills, or we need to rethinking how to teach creative writing? So maybe I would like to start here, and then I would like to ask you for questions first, and then we can continue.
Oh, yes, it comes back to empowering our students to use their voice. And if you have, I'm sure you have played with generative AI tools. The way that it currently produces creative writing, it uses language I would never use. It was I can't even come up with the words because they were so terrible. It was a golden autumnal evening. Like, who says that, right? So the language that it produces when you ask it to write something, for me, doesn't produce believable or authentic literature. So I think in terms of creative writing, we need humans, absolutely. Is that sufficient? I don't know if you want some more.
Yeah, I think if you think kind of methods which you can use, or if you're thinking with your student how to encourage them, which kind of methods use to improve their writing skills, if you have some experience in this area as well.
Yes, so absolutely. So in terms of improving writing skills, so for some of our students for whom English is not their first language, in the first instance, it's about correcting the grammar, the spelling, the punctuation, and it can do that well. But we would encourage students to submit a draft plus, so what they have written first, and then how it looks corrected, and then to say what the prompt was. So I put this prompt into ChatGPT, asked it to improve my spelling, grammar, punctuation, structure. This is what came out. And then this is what I did to it. So we ask students to explain how they have used the tool to improve their writing and to draft through their writing. It's around asking students to critically evaluate the output. So slightly different. We have a master's in translation, and machine translation has been around for several years now. It is used in the industry. So we get our students to use the machine translation and then critique the output. And that is the assignment, is to critique the output and then submit that. So in terms of improving the writing skills, definitely. And then I have colleagues who use it to write their emails. Colleagues for whom English is not a first language are telling me that they're using it quite often to write their emails.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's really funny because sometimes give you opposite meaning.
Yes, exactly.
So to be
You have
careful, but
you have to be
I
careful.
like it because I don't like, I don't use, it's my nature to not to use this kind of big English polite phrases.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
which can help me a little, of course, into. And then Lucy have a question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. And I think that what could help is authentic assessment, because this type of assessment is more about the process of learning, not about only about outcomes. And we must to know how the students work, how the process is, and after to speak about. So if we really make this authentic assessment, this could be okay also with or without generative AI, I think.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And there may be times where, so if in a module or in a course you have multiple assessment points, there may be some where you use generative AI and some where you don't. And as you say, so authentic assessment is, I think, a much better way to assess regardless. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the assessment is now hot topic even in Czechia.
Yeah.
I don't know if you learned it yesterday was coming just news from Czech Agriculture Czech University of Life Science, where they have very big problems. Discussion go to media because they have test center. Of course, some of teaching students teaching with different kind of spy, let's say, or spy technologies, earphones, small miniature earring phones, camera in a necklace, etc. Because they like to make a photo of test and this kind of thing. So there was also like discussion how some students need to get the underbra get out because they have some metal places and there was a security framework.
Yes,
So you're
yes.
going like maybe to airport or somewhere else. So for me, when I was reading this kind of risk tracing, well, do you really need some kind of so much tests for that? Why need this kind of circus and put so much money into this thing? So
yeah, and we had an interesting discussion with students about would they prefer face-to-face exams or online proctored exams, and the students said face-to-face because they know how to cheat in a face-to-face exam. They don't yet have figured out the online. But again, so few students do cheat. And we need to be teaching them about skills for life that matter for their employment. And this is a very cheeky answer and a very flippant, we would say in English. I say, we'll make assessment that is interesting for the students and they'll do it. If they're not interested in doing it, then they won't. Then they will resort to cheating. But make assessment that is meaningful and interesting and you will have a much better success rate. It's very easy to say, very hard to do.
No, for me, it's also the question if you say sometimes it's also like this kind of fear of AI. Fear of AI is a fear of stranger, as would say Romanian. So, and this is like AI will take my job as a teacher. But if you look on that, I think we will need to replace this kind of massive testings, or I think would be good to the massive. Then you need more teachers probably. So
yeah, exactly.
Any kind of questions, curious comments? Yes.
It's like comment that we have been talking about generative AI, and I don't know if to say I'm afraid of. I'm a little bit lucky that might be that very soon artificial general AI will be here. Yes, kind of connection of, let's say, these generative models and reinforcement learning. And it means that, like in Czech, we say that from some historical movie, we have something, the centralized brain of the mankind. Yeah. However, in this case, we are able to create really artificial brains. Yeah, and if our ideas could already like be related to this very possible future, and to think in this way already, or just to be just on this generative AI, or like to think a little bit forward.
I think that's a really, really good point. There's a man, Professor Kevin Warwick, who implanted a chip into his arm first and then into his brain. I don't know if you've seen any of his work. And there were a lot of those questions around, you know, what is AI of the future? What is that combination of human and AI? And I mean, who knows the answers? I don't have a crystal ball that can see the future, but I think you are right. Generative AI is here and now, and it is not going anywhere, but it will not, it's passing, you know, it's just one of many technological developments and advances. And I can't remember who said this, but the comment is, technology is anything that did not exist the day you were born. And I think about that. In 1990, I was a student, and in my class, I had a lady who was 90. So she had been born in 1900. And I did an interview with her. And I said to her, what a life. Think about it, like automobiles, yeah, planes. I can't remember what else I said. And I was saying, you know, this is amazing. But for me, the most amazing thing was women's voting rights. I said, you were here. You were part of this change for women's voting rights. How was it for you? She goes, oh, I suppose it was. I'm like, what? You know, in my mind, that women's voting right was like fundamental change that was so important. It was 70 years prior, and in her mind, it wasn't that big a deal. So I think, you know, in 70 years' time, when people are asking us about generative AI, is it going to be that big a deal? It's interesting to think about, but how we respond to it and how we move forward, how we embrace or don't embrace, and how we think about whatever's coming, it's having that growth mindset, being open to possibilities. I don't know if that responds, but
that's good. But I think, like as you finished the quote with Garry Kasparov, but I think we are already cyborgs in some way.
yes,
Because if, I don't know, my grandma passed away or my grandfather passed away a couple of years ago, but he was already a cardio stimulator, these kind of things. So even now, when you have different kind of technologies, even glasses, which are
yes,
not so.
yeah.
I don't know if Google Glasses, so I cannot cheat. But at the moment, but anyway, this combination and relation with technology will be more and more deeper, I guess, probably.
Absolutely. And I used to say, I taught computing years and years and years ago, and I used to say to my students, you know, think about it, having a computer in your glasses, because it was at that point in time, it was quite futuristic, but it's real, it's here, it's now, we're not using it. I saw something, I don't know if you've seen this, I was amazed. Glasses that can change the prescription. So it's like crystal LED this is a true thing that is here now. So you swipe the arm of the glasses and it changes from distance to reading.
Cool.
Yeah.
But I think what will be also need not to forget, even I'm a technological enthusiast, and I will give you worries also that sometimes we need to also learn students how to behave without technology.
Yes.
Or at least some kind of, because what can happen in some situation is technology will.
That's such a good
work.
point. That's such a good point. Yeah.
Also have some basic survival skills.
Yes, absolutely. And did you have a comment? Otherwise, I go to my next slide. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I think that no, I have no other comment. I think it's like about brainstorming. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I've got a some final thoughts here. So this is Peter Polonen, who is a Finnish futurist. I'll move out of the way so that you can take a picture. Okay. Sorry, he's a Finnish futurist, and Lucia and Hansa and I were very fortunate to hear him speak. And he talks about the fact that actually, because people are going, we're in this technology revolution, and it is a revolution. I was telling Lucia this summer, unfortunately, my husband had meningitis and he was in hospital, and he was moved from a private room when he was no longer infectious to a main ward. And the first time I went to visit him, the first thing he said to me, he goes, "No one in here knows what generative AI is." I was like, well, no, they don't. Like, we live in this generative AI bubble, but more and more and more people are understanding and knowing what it is. And when I ask staff, 6 months ago, 1/3 have used it. Now when I ask, 2/3 have used it. So we still have 1/3 of staff not using it. And there are still many people in the public who don't know what it is. My poor husband's like, how can they not know? I'm like, you know. So you know, this tech revolution, here it is. They just don't get it, he said. Petr Polinin says, actually, we need a human revolution. Yeah, and this comes back to your point around what if there is no tech? Yeah, we need to counterbalance that world that we've digitalized, and we need creativity, perseverance, compassion, curiosity. He has written a book on future skills, and he talks about 12 different skills that people need for the future. This is the human element, and absolutely, I think that that's really important, those soft skills that give our lives meaning and set us apart from humans. So that's my human side coming out. I'm very much a humanist. That's the philosophical perspective. And so I ask you, what differentiates you and your students from generative AI? And you know, take that thought forward. So lots of thought for you. I'll share the slides. Here are some good reads, and that is me now finished. And this is, you won't be surprised that it's purple, because yes, I am, yes, exactly. So I'm obsessed with purple, and my colleague said to me, well, at least it is not a dangerous obsession. And I thought, that's true. You can be obsessed. You can be addicted to a lot of things in life that are bad for you. Being addicted to purple is not so bad. So this was AI generated, and I said, you know, create an image of a purple skater in purple boots. I think I said on a starry night in the style of Coldplay, because I love Coldplay. And that's what it produced, and I think that's quite a lovely picture. So thank you, that's the end.
Okay. Thank you very much that you finish with Finnish and with skating, because I think it is also symbolic that I was already skating, get out from the train.
Yes.
So I think we was ready for it's a very actual picture. But I guess we have still some kind of time,
yeah.
if not wrong. So it's if we have nearly people. But if there is a question, there are questions. So I don't know if we still have some kind of questions, and you can, yeah, Peter.
I have a question or a comment regarding the sentence regarding the bias. You know, when we can go back to the provocative slide, because I wanted to answer, to react on the blue line, but I can't, or I couldn't, because I don't know the answer. My point is that actually I haven't studied like the generative AI produced content, so I can't give you the answer. But what I think is that they are different, and they are like the bias in generative AI produced content is harder, it's more important for us to be concerned, because like people having bias can be easily trained, and they can change mind. And as you said, and I agree with you, like the generative AI content is mostly programmed by white men, you know, like having the opportunities to the education, etc. So privileged white men. That's what I wanted to say. And it's less dynamic, let's say. That's what I think. But as I said at the beginning, I don't know the answer. But this is something I'm very interested in. So, what do you think? What is your opinion?
Yeah, I think for us as an institution, the Open University, we have been ignorant for a long time about the bias in our curriculum, and we have been working very hard over the last 5 years, as I said, to address the bias in our curriculum. We have focused very heavily on race and ethnicity. I don't think we focused sufficiently on other bias. I think that there is going to always be bias. There's always going to be bias. It's how we respond to, address, discuss, how we help our students engage with bias. I think along with that is the inclusive teaching. So thinking about how we can make sure that our students know that we think they matter. And for us, we are a very white university, for example. We have very few students who are black. Yeah, exactly. When we look at the outcomes, so the grades for our students who are black, we look at, are they retaining them? Are the grades they are getting? They are inequitable when you compare to white students. So we are doing what we can as a university. I think inequitable means that if the outcomes were equitable, that meant that everybody who deserves an A gets an A, everybody who deserves a B gets a B, everybody who deserves a C gets a C. But with inequitable, we are seeing that more black students get a C than is statistically significant. So we need to, as a university, we need to address that. And one of the ways we can address that is by making sure our curriculum is inclusive and representative, that we talk about histories that have been written out, for example. But this is not just around ethnicity, this is also around lower socioeconomic status. If I come back to the ethnicity for a minute though, for example, in a law curriculum, someone might say, oh, you have plenty of pictures of black people. But when you look at the pictures, the black people are the criminals. Yeah, so even though you might say you have a representative sample of number, it's not actually representative, it's not right. And so there are things like that that we need to look at as well. And then there's also around lower socioeconomic status and what that means to be from a background. Again, for us, we have a lot of students, about 1/3 of our students come from the most poor residential areas. We're not saying the students are poor, we're saying that the areas that they live in have low educational backgrounds, they have low socioeconomic status across the piece. So what are we doing as an institution? Because we have 1/3 of our students from those backgrounds. So how can we ensure that they have the technology they need? How can we ensure that they have the education they haven't got before? How can we bridge that gap with the education? Those kinds of things. What's really important is that we are saying, are we as a university ready for the students we are taking? And so those are the kinds of things that we've been looking at with the bias in our curriculum. We've been looking with the bias in how we deliver. During the pandemic, we took away exams. So we no longer had exams, it was all assessment. And the gap closed, so more black students were achieving better grades. And what do we do post-pandemic? We stick exams back in. So we know we've now gone back and said, right, okay, we need to think about different ways to assess that are better, and putting optionality in. Also around students with mental health difficulties, our biggest challenge is retaining those students. So what can we do as an institution to help retain those students? And these are not generative AI questions. These are questions around equitable, inclusive, and bias. I had a student tell me that she left the Open University because she was taking a course in psychology, and in that they were talking about somebody with mental health condition. I can't remember the story now, but the story had been so upsetting to her that she said, I cannot study at your university anymore. So I think in our curriculum we have blind spots, we have bias, we have challenges for our students before we even think about generative AI curriculum. So so this is why that question is the curriculum that we currently have, is that any different from a generative AI bias? Yeah, I mean, universities were set up by white men for white men. That's a fact. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's this is a really challenging thing, because we need to balance some kind of how to people can feel welcome. On the other hand, you need to think also necessary to build this kind of ability to be resilient, to not take things personally. Sometimes it's already crazy how people are offended by everything. Yes. So this time. And generally, I think we have also this kind of problems with people who are not, because of the family history, their parents were not going to the higher education system, so we still have less part of this population is coming to the higher education system as well. So we have a very system problem, not just the university. And I think one kind of thing is also, and you already mentioned, is a nice example that you can involve students to designing things and building university. I have a nice example. I just was last week. Yeah. Last week I was in St. Pölten. It's in Austria. It's a University of Life Science, and they have nice new campus. And I was speaking with the rector, and I said, well, the campus was 2 years old, and we was, but the process of building the campus doesn't so much time, but the process to designing, how to design these things take us a lot of time. There was also one lady who's one teacher who's also, I think, about social work responsible and sociology, these kind of things, really applied sociology, very nice one. And she leads this kind of process. So they get collected many inspiration from students, from teachers, administrative staff, and based on that, they try to find some consensus how to build a building. Because this is also, well, I think it's part, of course, some kind of money, because in many institutions, if you look on how they was designed, it's still 19th century approach, so it's not easy to change them somewhere. But these campuses like design everywhere, it's a mix of learning environments, offices, learning environments, canteen. They said only one thing. Why would they make joking? They have no pool, yeah, on the top of the roof. Yeah, but generally say the only thing we don't have so much money was the cinema, so we need to make small room for broadcasting the movie, and because there are also media schools. And generally, when I was working around the area, what I really liked was many self-study places. And what was better, and it was plugins, it was near to cafeteria, just a couple tables, near the library. There was also some space when you can to relax, yeah, with small also things when you can make food, or there was a micro owner, a different kind of place. I was not going around RL, but just a couple of them, and also possible to navigate people with disabilities and this kind of things as well. And that was I think very nice. And what I really liked was that was a small small sheet when you can. There was with QR code. There was or like this kind of leaflet, yeah, in with QR code. And there was okay, give us some feedback. How do you like this place? What you can do? Of course, they will not change everything, but they getting this feedback to improve the environment as well. Yeah. And sometimes also of course it's really challenging to be inclusive in every way, because I was in 2 weeks I was in Potsdam at the Hasso Institute when we had a workshop about design thinking, and they have special furniture for that, but a colleague was on a wheelchair and the tables were so high.
Yeah.
So there was also
rise fall desk.
Yeah. So how to change it? These kinds of movable things. And sometimes really difficult to design things to not forget on somebody. Yes. So every time there will be some kind of challenge every day, but the way I think is how we can try to avoid these barriers as much as possible.
Yes. Yeah. A few thoughts. I think student co-creation is really important in generative AI space. So asking your students how they use generative AI and how they would like to be assessed regarding generative AI. So really hear from your students and design your assessment with your students. We have student content consultants or something like this, but we have students who are hired by the university to be consultants in learning design. So engage with your students in the design of your assessment, because students, when I asked them, 2/3 of them were using generative AI 6 months ago. They are using it so much more than our staff. So engage with your students, work with your students in co-creation. That student co-creation is really important. One of the elephants in the room I did not talk about was sustainability. So the cost to the environment of generative AI, that is something that does come up regularly in discussion with staff and with students, and a reason why some people won't use generative AI. And then the last point I just wanted to make, which was think about why you all became teachers. Think about why you remain in education. And Professor Mike Sharple says, teaching is a caring profession. We all care. The machine doesn't care, but we all care, and teaching is a caring profession. So generative AI is not going to replace us. We are going to be here. I was speaking with your vice rector, and I love what he said. He said, if you have a village of 100 people, you need to have someone who is skilled to fight fires. You need to have someone who is skilled for medical emergencies. You need to have someone who is a pastor or a preacher for your church. And you need teachers. And all of these are things about caring and protecting humans. And I think that for me, that's how we go forward with generative AI. It's a caring profession.
So any kind of comments, question? If not, I see you are already hungry how to process the sauce and also make go for the food. So thank you very much that you came here. Thank you very much for Mychelle. One more applause for her.
Oh, no.
No?
And thank you to you for...
And we are looking forward to get her presentation later, and it'll be also published on websites of the university, so you can have chance to reflect it or invite somebody else to see this great presentation.
And do get in touch with me with any questions or emails, or you're very welcome to email me.